Let's get to it. Today we are breaking down a few high-profile court cases with, of course, our legal analyst, Whitney Traylor, starting with Trump's former advisor, Steve Bannon, who has been sentenced to 4 months in prison. It's over his refusal to testify or hand over any documents to Congress related to what he knew about the January 6th riots at the Capitol. However, Bannon won't be going to jail anytime soon. The judge said he can stay free pending his appeal. He will also be fined $6,500. Prosecutors were asking for $200,000. Now, it's been decades since anyone was incarcerated for contempt of Congress. So, Whitney Traylor, number one, thank you so much for being here. I know that we have a lot of questions for you, but I know you're going to begin.
Yeah, I'll jump right in. So, I mean, he got $65,000 instead of $200,000, or 6,500. I'm sorry, and then he also got 6 months.
Yes.
Right? Or
4 months.
He got 4 months. The Justice Department wanted 6
We're
months.
on top of it.
Listen, this isn't my zone here, Whitney. Why don't you take it from here? Because I don't know what the hell I'm talking about.
Let me jump in here. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, you got it. So the sentencing guidelines said between 1 and 6 months, and the prosecution did want 6 months and $200,000 fine. The judge ended up with 4 months, which is still within the sentencing guidelines, and a $6,500 fine. I thought that was actually a small fine, but with regard to the time, I think that's within the sentencing guidelines, and you know, it will hold until, you know, there's a question if he appeals and what happens during the appeal.
I just want to piggyback on that because you said $6,500 was low, and it was low. Why?
Well, I felt it was low because he could have gotten up to $200,000, and the issue was he just completely ignored these subpoenas. So they asked him to be deposed, where he came and gave information and then produced the documents. He didn't produce the documents, but one of the things he didn't produce was his financials, and he actually said, whatever the fine is, I can pay it. And so the prosecution said, well, then give him the $200,000 fine. He's essentially touting it, saying, I have the money. And the judge came back with $6,500.
So should he see prison, because that's yet to be seen, what type of prison should we anticipate him going to?
Well, it's going to be a low-level prison. It's not going to be some kind of maximum security, and it shouldn't be. You know, but the issue here, a lot of people are saying, well, why should he even be able to appeal? But on appeal, his argument during the trial was executive privilege, that, you know, because he was working for the president, he shouldn't have to reveal this information. And executive privilege is an important concept. But they said, no, you hadn't been in the White House in 3 years. President Trump didn't even really try to invoke the executive privilege as it relates to this. So that was the argument. But the judge said, you listened to your lawyers. The lawyers told you executive privilege. So we're going to let the appeal go forward before we impose the sentence.
Wow.
Essentially saying this argument might be viable.
I'm so mad, and I would like to ask you how to deal with my feelings, really. First off, if
He's not
he
a
does...
therapist, he's a lawyer.
Dr. Traylor. I'm just mad, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
He gets 4 months. Yes. Congress says come to us. They subpoena him. That's in the Constitution. You have to do that. You have to do that. You don't get to make a choice. He decided, I'm going to blow him off.
Yes.
So instead of actually holding him to justice, they said 4 months, which I agree is okay, but he can go home right now. Why not put him in handcuffs, deter other people, and have him taken away to jail?
Well, and I think they are arguing that by saying he's got this sentence. That is, nobody's been convicted of this in decades. So they're saying the fact that we even prosecuted this is relevant.
It's a big deal.
And he's saying, the judge said, he's not a flight risk. He's not a threat to everyone. We're going to let this appeal play out. And I can understand why you would.
I'm frustrated.
Well, let me double down on what Tori's saying, because you're saying that he's not a flight risk, all those things. Let's take Steve Bannon aside. If this were an average Joe, would they be given this courtesy?
It's hard to say. And, you know, this was, you got to keep in mind, this was contempt of Congress. This is a unique situation. And in fact, they relied on a very old statute in not allowing him to present evidence of the executive privilege. So Steve Bannon was arguing, Judge, you should try and make new law, essentially, by, you know, not relying on this old statute. And the judge said no. So the real question, I do think maybe if it was an everyday person, maybe not. But here it was such a legal issue that the judge, I think, wanted to show, fairness. And this sentence may still be imposed after the appeal.
Which means nothing to me. Sorry.
Well, see, I understand what Sam's saying because I'm thinking of it more in terms of the fine. Because let's take it out of this context and how we normally, just us everyday folk, right? If you pull a ticket when you go into a garage and it says if you lose that ticket, then you have to pay the maximum.
Correct.
It just seems as though that would translate somehow that if you don't have the proof or turn over the documents that the court is demanding you turn them over, that you would have to pay the maximum fine.
And what makes this even more egregious is that he was going on his show, he's saying
bragging.
you could suck it and all this other stuff. I mean, he's essentially giving the middle finger.
Yes, to the justice system and Congress.
Right, and one of their arguments was, well, the prosecutors could have went to court and compelled me, got a judge to compel, and they said, no, we don't want to compel you, we want to punish you because this statute is designed to punish people. You don't ignore Congress.
Right.
And so this will send a message. Now,
it'll be precedent. We'll see.
Yeah.
We have another case that we want your opinion on. Okay. So we're going to move on to this case involving actor Kevin Spacey. You may have heard a jury in New York found that he was not liable for battery. Kevin was accused by another actor, Anthony Rapp, if you remember, of laying on top of him in a bed when Anthony was 14 and Kevin was 26. But the jury concluded Anthony could not prove this actually happened. In court, Kevin's lawyers accused Anthony of, quote unquote, hitching his wagon to the Me Too movement when he accused Kevin back in 2017.
So why do you think that the jury went in Kevin Spacey's favor?
Well, I think you have to look at the facts and the law. So this happened, allegedly happened in 1986, and the elements of a battery are an offensive and unwelcome touch. And here the allegation was that he, maybe, grabbed his butt and pushed himself into him like that. And so why they agreed, the jury watched the evidence, they got to assess credibility, and I think they just determined this was really he said situation. And they must have believed Kevin Spacey because they found on liability. So they said no liability, because if they would have found liability, the second part is the damages, how much it was worth. But they said, no, we don't believe this happened.
Does time play a factor into that since it was 86 as well?
Right. That's a great question.
We looked it up for you, Mr. Traylor, because we were wondering why
every
could it be
state's different. Yeah,
but we also found out that last year they imposed in New York specifically a Child Safety Act that you could bring it back up from way longer ago.
That's correct.
And Anthony Rapp used that to bring it back up.
Yeah, I think that was a
thinking,
2020 law.
Yeah.
No,
Yes.
because across the states, different states have implemented this mostly around the Catholic Church and some of the abuse from some of the priests.
Because it was so long ago.
That's correct. So in this case, to get back to the question, I think the time actually hurt him because you have to consider the jury saying this was 1986. This was 30 years ago. There was no other allegation. This is like the first time we're hearing about it. I think the time actually worked against the plaintiff in this case.
Well, we will see more from Kevin Spacey because he's facing some pretty heavy charges and allegations in the UK and a number of other pretty egregious acts, allegedly. So, Whitney, we appreciate you always breaking it down for us. We need it. For more information on Whitney Traylor, go to his website, whitneytraylor.com, or his Instagram at YWTraylor. Thank you, Whitney.